Hello everyone, this is Kevin T. Rodriguez, film critic of iCritic.net, and let's talk about Netflix's 13 Reasons Why. Not for a very, very long time have I come across a show that has sparked so much debate amongst parents, school teachers, pastors, politicians, and even television critics, to be honest, about whether or not this is an appropriate show to watch, whether or not it's a show that should have even been made in the first place. I mean, you know, you have occasionally a piece of work will come along that people just revile around. And we're talking about your Clockwork Oranges, your Orange is the New Black, ER. You know, tons of shows that, you know, they just strike a nerve with people and people have to stop and ask, is this suitable to even make? And for the record, I'm going to state by saying, yes, it is suitable to make. You should be allowed to make anything, tell any story you want to, and that's the whole point of free speech. But then, of course, the question remains, should you watch it? And, of course, that is a much more personal question, and one that I don't think you can generalize. But let's focus on what people are truly concerned about, and that is the kids, naturally. And the big question people are asking, of course, is, should kids be watching 13 Reasons Why? Well, first of all, I need to point out a very obvious fact that seems to escape a lot of people who are complaining about the show, and that is the fact that the show is rated TVMA. That means it's for mature audiences, and it's not meant for kids. So, no, of course kids shouldn't be watching it. But, of course, what a weak argument that is. I mean, you know, kids are going to watch it anyway, right? I mean, my parents wouldn't let me watch Family Guy, and I watched that growing up, so what's to stop kids from watching this, right? So yes, the point is well taken. Kids shouldn't be watching the show. It is not made for kids, but kids are more than likely going to watch it, especially since that Netflix account is definitely in pretty much every computer, living room, tablet, cell phone, and you oh so concerned parents probably didn't think to utilize the Netflix parental control option that you could easily set up, but no one seems to actually do it and instead decide to complain and whine about it whenever Netflix makes a show that kids shouldn't be watching. But now that we've gotten through the little snarkiness, the basics, let's say you get through all of that. It's rated TVMA, so kids shouldn't watch it. And there are parental locks on the Netflix accounts that you could be utilizing to prevent your kids from watching it. But chances are your kids are going to be watching it anyway. And then comes the big concern. Can kids handle it? And, you know, what does it mean? Because there's a lot of debate whether or not this show actually glamorizes suicide or whether or not it makes it look as harsh as it really is. And I am not actually reviewing the show at this time. I'm going to be making a separate video when I finish watching the show. But let me say that I can see both sides of the argument a little bit at this point, and I will have a much more firm grasp of whether or not I think the show set out to do what it set out to do, which is to make a dramatic story about a girl who commits suicide and then leaves tapes behind, basically to tell people why she came to that conclusion and why she felt this was the best move for her and what drove her to desperation. And I have to say, so far, it has been a very effective storytelling device, and it's been a very effective story, but I am definitely a little on the edge on whether or not this is actually making suicide seem as bad as it should, or whether it is in some unintended way glamorizing it. Again, though, that will be in a separate review, which will be an actual review of the show. Right now, we're talking about what should parents do if they suspect their kids are watching the show. Because a lot of churches and schools have taken the stance that, you know what, in class, you cannot talk about it. The themes are too sensitive, cannot talk about it, and I feel that's a mistake. Because in my opinion, pretending a problem doesn't exist does not actually make it so. Ignoring the problem has never worked in my opinion. I don't think it's worked for a lot of people. It just makes the problem worse until something finally happens, and guess what? You can't change the problem because you didn't talk it out. In fact, one of the story points in the show is how many people were just wondering, why didn't this girl tell us what the problem was? Why didn't she talk it out? Had we just known? And then, of course, there's the issue that some people actually did know and still chose to do nothing about it. So, really, when you get down to the show's logic, ignoring it or talking about it, it doesn't really matter. But the reality is, it does matter. It does matter, and the thing is, the show is popular. It is catching fire with people, and it is very popular with teenagers who, honestly, are probably relating to it on one level or another. And yes, as a parent, that should concern you. But I don't think it should concern you to the point where you just decide to shut it off and not talk about it or anything like that at all. Now, I am not a parent of kids. I mean, I'd like to be, but I just simply am not. And I have always believed, though, that talking things out and understanding one another goes a very, very, very long way. So here's what I would recommend parents do for whatever it's worth, as someone who's actually watching the show, as someone who reviews movies for a living, and who actually gives parents advice on whether or not their kids should watch this stuff. I would go up to your kid and say, I have a question to ask you. Have you been watching 13 Reasons Why? And then tell them, you will not get in trouble for whatever the answer is. Now, it's important that when you say that, and they admit that they've been watching a show that they know they're not supposed to be watching, or a show that you probably have told them you don't want them watching, you cannot punish them. This is absolutely critical. Do not punish them for watching the show. Ask them, say, it doesn't matter what the answer is, I just want to know if you're watching this show. And then, if the answer is yes, ask them what you think of the show. Ask them generally if they're liking the show or not. And please, be interested. Don't be judgmental. Be prepared for whatever they have to say. After that, you can then ask them, do you have any question about the show? And I'm asking you this because I am concerned. I know that the subject of suicide and depression is complicated and it's scary. And I want to be there for you. And if you have any questions about the show, I want to be there to answer them. If you have any questions about the subject, I want to talk it out because I want you to be here for as long as you can. Now, if they say no, that is not the end of the conversation. Ask them, did they want to watch the show? If they honestly answer no, you can drop the subject. But if they honestly answer yes, this might be a time where you need to bend a few viewing rules. Tell them, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to watch the show, but we're going to watch it together, you and me. And we will not fast forward anything. I will not be mad at you for watching it. We are going to watch the show together and we are going to discuss the show together. We are going to talk about any questions you might have about the subject. We are going to talk about any concerns you might have. If there are feelings that the character's feelings that you are feeling, I want to know about them. I want to know if you relate to this and why you relate to this. And here's the thing. This is going to go a long way because talking things out and your kid knowing that you genuinely want to understand where they are in life, that is huge. And this is the kind of bonding that most parents frankly skirt these days. And the fact that they're actually asking people just don't even watch the show, don't even bring it up, shows that people still don't want to talk about these topics. And then, but when someone does do something stupid or gets to the point where they're on the verge to it, they wonder what happened. Well, you never talked about it. You never took the time to understand this was an issue and people felt too guilty to bring it up in the first place. So do what you can to make sure that they know this is not something to be ashamed about. I mean, it's a scary thing. It's a permanent solution to a very temporary problem and it's wrong. But you know what? If you are feeling suicidal or depressed, there is no shame in admitting it. In fact, it's a good thing you're admitting it because that means we can address the topic now, hopefully before you do something that you are going to regret or can't take back. And as for the argument that the show could affect someone who's not mentally stable, yes, that is always a possibility. Movies, books, music, art, it always influences us. I'm not going to say it's not. That's one of the reasons I love writing about movies because it gets me to think about the world in ways that I had never thought about before. But you can't stifle art or people's voices or opinions just because someone might be a little unstable and do something crazy. Because guess what? There's a lot of other people who are not unstable and they could very well be affected in a very positive way for shows like 13 Reasons Why. I mean, the fact that suicide is even being discussed in the mainstream media because of this show and whether or not it glamorizes it or not, that's actually a good discussion to have, because believe it or not, glamorization of suicide and killing oneself was going on long before this show came along. Like, you know, when I was in high school, there were goth kids who worshiped the idea of death and felt that the afterlife was something to strive for. And yes, of course, depending on your beliefs, there might very well be something worthwhile after death, but there very well could just as easily be a very dangerous, very unpleasant thing after death if you are not careful. And of course, for some people, they don't believe there's anything there at all. And really, if there is nothing after death, why would you leave this world so soon? As for whether or not the show promotes suicide or discourages suicide, I'm leaning towards that it discourages suicide. But again, I haven't finished the show. I'm like 7 episodes or tapes into it, so I won't know for sure until I get to the end. But my initial reaction is that it does show the aftermath of suicide and basically how miserable most people are and how much regret they have once someone is not there. So I don't think this is going to be that scary of a show to tackle. But if you are concerned about your kids watching it, it's pretty simple. Ask them if they're watching it. Don't get mad if they are. And if they want to watch it, you know what? Watch it with them. And say that we're going to watch it together and we're going to discuss it together. And we're not going to hold back any of the questions. There's no such thing as a bad question. And be honest with each other about it. That's the only way you can actually parent this properly. And 13 Reasons Why, this was a completely controllable event. And yeah. That's the key word. It's controllable, it was avoidable, and in the show, it probably could have been avoided if the characters talked to each other more before she died and before she left this little breadcrumb of clues about why she killed herself. And the whole trick is, in real life, you want to have that conversation and find out those reasons before the actual act happens. And you know what? I've actually read some stories where some parents actually went to their kids and they asked them, have you watched this show? And the kid said yes. And they said, so what do you think? And the kid said, I feel just like that main character and I've been thinking about suicide for a long time. Now, that's a scary thought. That is a very scary thought, but think about it. Those parents might not have ever asked those kids had this show not come around. What a blessing it is for those parents that they were able to find out this is how their kid felt before anything actually happened. So in my opinion, if it saved just one life, the show's a success. But again, I'll give my full thoughts on the show in a separate video, which will probably go up next week sometime. In the meantime, what do you folks think? Especially any parents out there. Do you believe that talking out with your kid is a good thing, or would you rather just not discuss it at all? I would really love to know. Comment below. Like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. Flame responsibly, especially with this one. This suicide is not a fun topic. It is very serious. Let's try to be respectful of people's opinions of it, okay? Have a good night.